Welcome, brothers and sisters, especially members of the Discount Carmelite Secular Order, and all of you who are interested in the spirituality of St. Teresa and St. John of the Cross as lived by members, lay members, who commit themselves to this religious order. We are talking about the constitutions and trying to understand, reflect upon the different numbers and why are things put in the constitutions, what are they there for? Generally speaking, one of the purposes of law is to place or make evident or put in print in a concrete way the limitations of power. Power is a terrible thing if it's not handled correctly, if it's not subjected to the law of the church, if it's not subjected to the law of Christ as given in the gospel. Love your Lord, the Lord your God, with all your heart, mind, and soul. Love your neighbor as yourself. Every law must submit to those commandments, those two great commandments. Every law must, the litmus test of every law is, does it put in place the love of God and the love of neighbor? And that applies in the church, that applies to even laws that are restrictive. Especially important is limitations. The limitations of authority. You discover your power, the power that you have as a leader. You discover that by following the law. Remembering always that what I just said a few minutes ago, that the ultimate law is the law of the gospel. The law of the life of Jesus Christ. Limitations are very important. They're very important in the spiritual life. We talk about, especially with St. Teresa and studying the spirituality of St. Teresa, how important the importance she places on self-knowledge. Self-knowledge is to know your limitations. It's a wonderful experience to find out your limitations, and most of us find out our limitations by going beyond what we really are able to do. Someone discovers the limitations of alcohol by getting intoxicated. If it happens once or twice, then you know what, I can't drink that much. I can't drink that limit. That's the limitation that you physically know. It's the same thing in the spiritual life. Limitations are wonderful. Because within the limitations, that's where you can live, that's where you can enjoy yourself, that's where you'll find God, in your limitations. And I've sometimes said that discovering your limitations is a mystical experience. Because you discover where God is within you. So, the law places limitations on the exercise of authority. And that's what we're talking about in terms of the leadership of the community and the ministry of the friars to the community. I'm going to read 24 completely again. 24E. I'm going to read again. It's complete. Excuse me, just 1 minute. 24E. A community that devoutly seeks God will find the balance between individual rights and the good of the community as a whole. A community that devoutly seeks God. Thus, the rights and needs of each of the members must be respected and safeguarded according to the laws of the church. But likewise, members must faithfully fulfill their duties in relation to the community as laid down in the constitutions. In order to dismiss a member for a reason that's set out in the Code of Canon Law, and the reasons are in the parentheses: public rejection of the Catholic faith, abandonment of ecclesiastical communion, or being under imposed or declared excommunication. Or other provisions in the provincial statutes, the community council should observe the following procedure. So, we'll stop with this there. That's what we were talking about the last time. There's code. There is indicated in the Code of Canon Law 3 reasons why a person can be dismissed from an organization in the church, whether it be a priest, a nun, or a secular order member, or a member of the Brown Scapular confraternity. You can be dismissed if you abandon the faith, if you withdraw from ecclesiastical communion, if you withdraw from the community, you withdraw from the community for no apparent reason, other than not wanting to follow with the community anymore, or being excommunicated either automatically or personally, or other provisions in the provincial statutes. The community council should observe the following procedure. There's a procedure to follow in order to have someone dismissed. Verify the certainty of the facts. No suspicion is good enough for expelling someone from the community. You can't, if you suspect something. It must be a provable fact. It must be observable. Yeah. If you have a member who, for some reason or another, you suspect there's something wrong, make a physical note of it. Write it down someplace in the chapter, because you discuss it when the council meets, in the council notes, not to be published. But in the council notes to put down, at this meeting, this person acted in such a way that it disrupted the whole community, upset the whole community. Then the next month at the next meeting, the same thing happened. Write it down. On June the 1st, on May the 1st, on April the 1st, on February the 1st. Write it down so that you have a record of what you're talking about when you go to talk to the person. When you go to find out what's happening, why are they so upset? What's happening with them? You have on the 1st of June you did this, on the 1st of May you did this, and the 1st, because you want to enter into a dialogue. The last thing you want to do is dismiss. The first thing you want to do is find out what's happening with this person. Why are they so unhappy in the community? So verify the certainty of the facts. 2, warn the member in writing or before 2 witnesses. When it comes to the point of deciding that this person needs to be dealt with directly, you have to do it in writing so that they have concrete. And again, no suspicion, no hearsay, no gossip is allowed. You write out, here's a problem that we notice. And we notice it over and over again. Please approach some council member, either the president or one of the councilors or the formator, the director of formation, directors of formation. Invite the person to dialogue. Allow a reasonable time for repentance. Remember, the purpose of punishment is to bring people back not to throw people away, but to bring people back. Maybe there's some confusion on understanding the constitutions. Maybe there's some difficulty in understanding what the secular order is about, what the commitment to the secular order means. Allow sufficient time, a reasonable time for repentance. If after all this there is no change, it is permitted, after consulting the provincial, to proceed with the dismissal. In all cases, the member retains the right to appeal to the competent ecclesiastical authority. And you must communicate that to the person. You must be able to say to the person, because of this activity, because of this actions that you have demonstrated, because of this, the constant interruption of the running of the community, because of your unhappiness in being in community meetings, which is evident by your actions, you are going to be considered an expelled member of the community. You must say then, you have the right to appeal this to the provincial. And then after the provincial, it's the general. So there's an appeal process that goes through. And I know from experience, if it goes to the Holy See, the Holy See's word is the final word. If a person appeals to the provincial, and the provincial backs up the community council. If the general backs up the provincial and backs up the provincial, and the Holy See backs up the person is being discussed, the Holy See wins and the person remains a member of the community. So you want to be as dialogical as possible. You do not want to be vindictive. A side note here, sometimes friars themselves do not understand that the secular order functions according to a set of rules and constitutions. I've heard of cases of friars who have imposed members on a community. They've said to their friends, you are now members of the secular order, and they receive them, they make their promise to the priest individually, and then he tells the community, this person is a member of the community. He has no right to do that. He can invite a member, a friend, anybody. He can invite them to contact the secular order and see if they belong there. I've also seen where the spiritual assistant wants somebody to leave the group, wants to put somebody out of the group. It's not his decision. It's the council's responsibility and the council's decision. And the last paragraph. In the case where a member, after a serious evaluation and discernment with the community council, comes to the decision to voluntarily leave the community, the request is to be made in writing to the competent authority of the community, to whom they are committed by reason of their promises. The provincial is then to be informed of all of this. So in the one case, we were talking about people who are leaving the community by decision of the council of the community. In the other case, we're talking about people who are leaving the community by their own discernment. The second case is rare. At least in my experience, it happens sometimes, and people decide to separate from the community, no longer participate in the community. They write a letter to the council. Then the council has to keep records so that this person's absence from the community or removal from the community is documented, because it's possible for somebody to not fit in one community but does fit into another community. It's possible that way. I've known sisters, nuns, who've entered cloistered community of nuns and been very unhappy, and the community decides for them to leave. And the reason they will leave, not because of any moral reason, not because of any disobedience, or not because of any disruptive behavior, but because of their unhappiness in that community. Yet they go to another cloistered community of discalced Carmelite nuns, and they end up being very happy. I dealt with a case one time where a monastery that was under the jurisdiction of the bishop, but very close to the fathers, called me. I was provincial, and they had, according to I met with the superior of the community and the novice mistress, and they had a particular sister who the community voted to send away. But the novice mistress and the prioress were both convinced that this young woman had a vocation to discalced Carmelites, and they asked me to help them find a monastery for her. And I found another monastery. And she left that particular monastery and then entered into the southern monastery. That was 30 years ago, I think. Almost 30, at least 30 years ago. And she's still in that other monastery. She's very happy. Just because someone doesn't belong in one community doesn't mean they don't belong maybe in another community. But you have to have records so that one community, the community that's thinking of accepting this other person, has to be able to receive from the community that the person left, has to be able to receive some information. And if it's a couple years later and it's a new council and a new president, and they know nothing of the story because there's no record, it's a disservice. So each council keeps records, which they pass on council to council to council to council. So that it's a service. Now let's look again at the paragraph on the procedure, which is the third paragraph. There's 4 paragraphs. Third paragraph. Verify the certainty of the facts. I've talked enough about that. It has to be concrete, it has to be provable, it has to be evident, it has to be deliberate. Deliberate. It has to be some action that the person can control, but decides to do anyway. You have to warn the member in writing, or before 2 witnesses, the president with two counselors, or the formation mistress, the director, the formator, with 2 counselors. Allow reasonable time for repentance. Reasonable time depends on what the difficulty is. If the difficulty is attendance at meetings, well, the next meeting they should attend. That's a reasonable time. Or if not the next meeting, the meeting after that. But if they don't start returning to participating in the meetings, again, it's non-participation in the meetings is to me like Charlie Brown saying, I love people, I love humanity as people I can't stand. So if the person is not participating in the meetings, why are they not participating in the meetings? Find out. Put it down, write it down, have it written down. Person, and then keep a record, keep attendance. Everybody, I think, keeps attendance at who's at the meeting. The secretary should note at each meeting who's present, who's absent. Who's absent with permission. I've been in meetings of larger communities where there's a roll call, and then somebody's not there, and then somebody, a council member says, he or she informed me of the reason for her absence. Pardon me, I have trouble focusing with my eyes. If after all this there is no change, it is permitted, after consulting the provincial, and I can't, you don't go to the provincial and say, we expelled this member. You go to the provincial with an outline, with the written outline of what is happening with this member, why it's happening, and for this reason, this person is going to be asked to remove himself, from the membership. And then you write it down it's in the acts of the council. So-and-so, after having consulted with the provincial, has been invited to withdraw from membership in the secular order and is no longer obligated or connected to the secular order by her promise. If she has a vow of course is forever, but the vows are private. The vows are not institutional. When you make a vow, it's a private act that the community witnesses. To be dispensed from the vow, you have to be dispensed from a priest, a confessor. The provincial, and in all cases, the member has the right to appeal to the competent ecclesiastical authority. I urge, especially those of you who are leaders of the community, I urge you to read this number 24E carefully. We're following the gospel here. We're looking for repentance. We're looking for change. We're looking for tolerance on the part of the person who's being considered for expulsion, but tolerance also on the part of the council. We're looking for dialogue, discussion. Maybe there's a justifiable reason for this person to be in the situation they're in. Maybe there is. If you don't investigate, you won't know. And sometimes it's necessary, as I said before, to ask the spiritual assistant, because there might be more confidence on the part of the person in difficulty. It might be more possible for that person to discuss what the situation is with the priest. I've known of cases where somebody's been absent from meetings. The reason why they're absent from meetings is because they have some financial difficulty and cannot afford to pay the dues. And they're embarrassed because when it comes time for paying the dues at the community meeting, they cannot do it. I know one community where they invited the member to hand in an empty envelope and giving her, dispensing that particular woman from the obligation to pay the dues. That was after they discovered what was the reason for her absence. The answer to difficult people, every community has somebody that's a little bit different. Every community of friars, every community of nuns, every community of secular order. There's people who have problems. We are people who have problems. Some of us are able to handle that problem ourselves, or with the help of a confessor, or with the help of somebody that we can talk to. But some people don't know they have a problem. They're completely aware of what's wrong with everybody else, but they're not aware of what's wrong with them. It's the case of the splinter in the eye. And the splinter is seen very clearly by the one who has a beam of wood in his or her eyes. And the beam has to come out before the splinter can be touched. We're trying to follow Jesus in the gospel. That's the supreme law of the church. The supreme law of the church is following the two commandments, love of God and love of neighbor. We implement laws for the purpose of including people, not excluding people. Sometimes it's a very immature action to send somebody away because you don't know what to do, because you don't know how to handle it. So, this number 24E that we've been talking about this week and the last week, it's critical for understanding. Now it says in the first paragraph that members are obligated to participate according to the constitutions. It says, when it's talking about the membership, members must faithfully fulfill their duties in relation to the community as laid down in the constitutions. Participation in meetings. Participation in meetings. Not just being at the meeting, but participating in the meeting, communicating in the meeting. In the beginning, you might join because your friend is a member of the secular order. Your friend who you know from their parish or from the choir that you sing in, or somebody that you know, your spouse belongs to the secular order. I know of one case where a man joined the secular order because his wife was a member of the secular order. And she was in simple first promises. She was in the first promise. She had made her first promise. He became an aspirant, and then a postulant, then a novice. While he was in a 2-year novitiate program, his wife decided to withdraw from the secular order, and he stayed. He went all through. He was still a member of the secular order, and a very admirable member of the secular order. But his wife is no longer. So there's all sorts of reasons why people come. But everybody comes with their questions, their confusions. And the part of the formation program is to help people through their confusion. That's why people who are in charge of formation or formation classes have to be people who are able to listen to other people, to be compassionate. Leadership has to be able to listen, not just speak. Again, I mentioned before, this number is very important because it touches upon the point that is most troublesome in some communities, an unhappy community because of an individual member or some individual members who maybe don't have a vocation to the secular order, do have a vocation to Carmel, but not the secular order of Carmel. It's a process of discernment. But if you remember the counsel, patience, dialogue, listen, and decide wisely. Don't decide vindictively. Remember, again, I'll repeat this again, the purpose for correction is not the same as punishment. There's no punishing. Correcting in order to bring a person back into the fold. Member, brother, sister. Any know-it-alls? Know-it-all, sábelo todo. Any know-it-all, they really don't need to be in the secular order. And from the community's point of view, they really need to not be in the secular order. We're all here to learn, and we learn together. But just remember, nobody is punished. Corrected? Yes, we all need correction at some point or another, but not punishment. God bless you. I know this number is a difficult number, and, but it's a necessary number to understand. With that, we conclude this section of the 3B on fraternal communion. And the next section is 4, serving God's plan. But we've been clear about these numbers in 24, A, B, C, D, and E. These 5 numbers on community, and the place of community, the reason for community, the limits of community, and the limits of authority. This has all been so that we can put ourselves into the service of God's plan, which is what we will discuss in the next video. God bless you. Hit the like button if you like, if this content has been clear. Any questions, ask. Subscribe if you want to, and hit the notification bell. Thank you very much. This is heavy. It's heavy for me, at least, to talk about it. That's why sometimes I might have been a little bit confusing to follow. But listen carefully. Listen carefully. God bless you.